Manchester United have just lost 3-2 at home to Galatasaray in the Champions League. That puts them bottom of their group, and it comes off the back of them losing 1-0 at home again to Crystal Palace at the weekend. Are Man United really bad, or are there just a few things going on that have got them in a bit of a funk at the moment? So in this video, I'm going to look at 4 different parts we can take from the Galatasaray game and how they can apply to what's going on at Man United at the moment and whether we can see it getting any better in the future. So first, we're going to take a quick look at how both teams set up in this game. Man United have been in this kind of 4-3-3 shape that we've seen in other games, with Amrabat playing at left back, obviously because of the injuries to Shaw and Reguilon at the minute. So when in possession, Amrabat would tuck inside, Lindelof would kind of move a little bit wider, and Dalot would kind of sit, and Varane would sit in this sort of 3 at the back shape. Amrabat would sit alongside Casemiro, giving Mount and Mejri kind of the ability to overlap or underlap Rashford and Fernandes, depending on whether they were quite narrow or whether they were quite wide, and they could fill in those spaces as necessary. And when looking at Galatasaray, it was this 4-4-1-1 sort of 4-2-3-1 bank that was going on, pressing in a 4-4-2 where Koglu would kind of do a lot of the running on alongside Icardi, and when in possession it would be in that 4-2-3-1, and Koglu again would kind of run off him in kind of like a number 10 sort of role, kind of playing off Icardi, who obviously doesn't necessarily have that pace, but Koglu was definitely probably the most threatening player throughout the game for Galatasaray. So the first main point that I'd take from this Galatasaray game is the confidence and trust throughout the Man United team. So I think it's really well highlighted in this first Galatasaray goal. The first ball is in from Davinson Sanchez, in here to Wilf Zaha, who's up against Dalot. And Zaha pins Dalot and kind of creates a very kind of difficult defensive situation for him. But moving on to the next screenshot of this, I feel like this is where the kind of confidence and trust, or lack thereof, kind of highlights itself. Because here, Varane ideally should be taking control of the situation, or at least helping Dalot in taking control of it. Because that ball ideally shouldn't bounce. And as every year 7 PE teacher has ever told you, the best way to defend is to stop the ball from bouncing, because you can take control of that situation. I admittedly wasn't a very good defender when I was in year 7, but that's enough about that. Varane really needs to help Dalot to take control, because Dalot's being physically dominated by Zaha. However, once that ball bounces and Varane is the wrong side of the situation, Zaha can just pin Dalot, really control the situation. The only thing Dalot can do is just try and get a leg in front of the ball, which he eventually does, but it just deflects straight into the back of the net. So I think this really highlights how the lack of communication in the back four really isn't helping them to defend properly and defend effectively, which could have really helped to squash this situation. Now, the second point you can highlight from this game is individual errors, and that comes from a couple of different parts, namely the second goal and the penalty incident. So here, the ball comes in from the left-hand side from a throw-in. 53 here, can't remember his name, feints, and the ball goes past him into Icardi. Icardi turns and plays that ball back to 53, who's already straight past Amrabat, and he's in behind. The thing to highlight here is Casemiro and Lindelof. So Lindelof's just in complete no man's land. He's been turned and just is not able to react. We highlight this run here, just isn't tracked. Casemiro just doesn't track it at all, has no idea that he's there, and he proceeds to run into this position here. One of the key parts of the reason why this goal happens is because this ball and this passing lane here is just completely free. Lindelof is not busking up to get into here. Casemiro is not getting back. So that ball there is free, and then Koglu here just easily finishes into the far post, and there's a second goal. And that all comes from just slight individual errors. It's a run behind off him, which Koglu is what he does. He makes those runs in behind off Icardi, and you'd imagine that Casemiro would know this before the game. So why is he then just letting him run off the back of his shoulder? The same as Lindelof. It's just a really poor goal to concede generally. And speaking of generally poor goals to concede, I mean, the penalty just completely compounds this. So Onana, the ball comes in here from Lindelof, comes back into here. Admittedly, Mauro Icardi here has closed this passing lane back to Lindelof. So you'd argue that either this ball has to go into Varane, has to go into Casemiro quickly, or it needs to go long. And obviously, what happens is the ball goes into Casemiro really slowly. So the ball comes into this sort of area here, into Casemiro, who's here. But as you can see, Onana's about to take the ball, but Mertens here is already moving to this right-hand side to intercept that ball. And Onana should see that. For some reason, he doesn't. And obviously, this is what they're trying to do. Lindelof here is pointing to Casemiro, who's here, for the ball to go into that area, because that's the way they want to build up, and they don't want to hoof it long because they might lose the ball. But obviously, that just results in the ball, Mertens just intercepting the ball, and what happens from then on is that Casemiro tries to come back, concedes the penalty, gets sent off. Admittedly, Icardi misses the penalty, but it just highlights just the lack of confidence in this group and the lack of just the individual errors that happen so much in this team. It's just kind of crazy because Onana was you could argue one of the best, if not top 5 goalkeepers last season when he was playing for Inter, and he's come into this team and he's started to just make errors. And when we look at how he's played in the Champions League for Man United as well, there's another error here. So Sané, this is in the Bayern game where they lose 3-2 away at Bayern. Sané picked up the ball originally to the right hand side of Rashford, sort of in this area. He plays the ball into Harry Kane. Rashford doesn't track him. Sané comes around the corner. He shoots. The ball just goes straight through Onana, tips it off, and it goes into the back of the net. These are mistakes that Onana would just not have been making before he came to Man United. Kind of carrying on from these individual errors, again, we see where this third goal comes from. So obviously, Amrabat tries to clear this ball. Davinson Sanchez heads it back in, and Mauro Icardi is just left completely onside. Played onside by Amrabat in this position, which he is very unfamiliar of. Obviously, because Luke Shaw and Reguilon are currently injured, but it kind of comes with the territory when you're playing a man who's arguably one of the best holding midfielders, as we saw in the World Cup with Morocco. And when he's playing in a position where he's not natural, things like this are going to happen because he's not done it very often. Admittedly, though, he is a professional footballer, so he should know that he's going to be playing Icardi onside here. But it's not the only problem here. There's a lack of reaction, a lack of awareness from the general Man United back four. The ball gets played through, Icardi's through on goal, and Onana again doesn't cover himself in glory. Because you can see here, Mauro Icardi's head is very much down, looking at the ball. Onana's just not really closed the gap between him and Icardi. He's had a lot of time to do so. I don't know whether that's a technique thing. I'm not a goalkeeper, obviously. By the time Mauro Icardi goes to take that shot, Onana's already kind of fainting to that right-hand side. He's already moving down. He's already a lot lower. And you can see that this ball was definitely going over him. And to be honest, it doesn't really go very far over him. So if he stands up, takes that gamble, then arguably he probably does save that shot. But I think it's also, again, the lack of confidence within the team, within Onana in his role, is highlighting, why they're not performing generally as well as they should be. Because Onana last season, I think, probably saves this chance because it's just really it's not a perfectly executed chip and it's savable. So the third point that I'd highlight from this game was that Man United just kept on creating opportunities that they did not finish. And that's highlighted here by the Rashford chance. You can imagine what's going through his head. He's obviously seen Fernandes and he's making that run and he wants to make that pass for, to create an easier chance to score. But he just takes way too long and the pass is under hit as well and probably underestimates the speed of Sacha Boey here. But, these are just situations where if you're going to do well in this sort of, in the Champions League, in the Premier League, you have to take these chances because you're creating them and it's going to bite you in the back if you don't take these chances, and it did. But the final point, and to end it on a slightly more positive note, is Hojlund. Now Hojlund did really well in this game, scored 2 good goals, the second of which comes from him basically carrying the ball half the pitch, outpaces Abdul Karim, who admittedly isn't the fastest centre-back, but outmuscles him, and he finishes brilliantly chipping over the keeper. He was quite expensive, he came from Atalanta for £75 million, even after the year before Atalanta had bought Hojlund from Sturm Graz for 12. It kind of highlights some deficiencies in Man United with, the spending and transfer market activity, but also that now they do have a centre forward that they can rely on. And just a quick little bit on Ten Hag. He doesn't strike me as a man who would be particularly galvanising or a particularly strong leader. Now, I don't want to, jump on the bandwagon of the whole Ange loving. It's been a bit endless recently, but you can compare him to Ange in the way that he kind of speaks to the media and the way he kind of talks about leadership and stuff. Ten Hag doesn't really come across as a man who instills confidence. Admittedly, I might be wrong, but from the outside, that's kind of how it looks. If he is going to continue to come under scrutiny, as the team are playing kind of below their capabilities, does he have that within him to kind of galvanise this group, even with all the outside stuff that's currently going on? Antony, Greenwood, Sancho, lots of stuff that is going on. But does he have the personal attributes to kind of create this buzz within the dressing room to kind of bring up the players and to instill the confidence that they're, as we've seen throughout this video, kind of lacking in certain areas. So Man United's next 2 games in the Premier League are Brentford at home, Sheffield away, and that's before their Manchester derby at the end of October. But you'd argue that in the next 2 games, Brentford and Sheffield United, Man United need to kind of turn a corner. Likely Luke Shaw might be back by the end of October, and then he can actually play Amrabat in his familiar position. As I said, being one of the better defensive midfielders in the world, that will definitely help them in their build-up and in their defensive solidity within the midfield, and it will definitely help just to calm things down a lot, give Casemiro a little bit less to do, and because he's looking a little bit stretched and a little bit leggy at times. But when looking at the Champions League, Man United now ideally need to go away to Galatasaray and beat them. But if Ten Hag, as I said, can sort out all the issues going out within this squad, particularly kind of on like an emotional level, confidence, trust within the team, then there's no reason why they can't get to a position where they can beat these teams and get back on track. Overall, United really aren't that bad. They don't suck that much. But if things continue in the same vein as we've seen in this game, then we might have to kind of come back and revisit that statement in the future, because they're either going to go one of 2 ways. They're either going to continue on a downwards trajectory from here, or with the introduction of some players like Luke Shaw, as I said, coming back into the team, a couple of easier games, arguably easier games, Brentford not doing so well at the moment, and Sheffield United as well not doing great, then hopefully that confidence will build before the Manchester derby, and then we'll kind of see from then. Hopefully that game for them goes, at least goes okay. So hope you've enjoyed this little assessment of what went on in that Man United Galatasaray game. If you want me to do anything similar to this in the future, let me know. And yeah, see you in the next one.